here's something that the DJI Goggles 2 can do that the DJI Goggles 3 cannot. They have removable antennas. And that means that you can put aftermarket antennas on the DJI Goggles 2 to improve their range and penetration. And yeah, technically you can do that with the Goggles 3 and the Integra, which don't have removable antennas, but it involves opening the goggles up and doing surgery on them. It's a big pain in the butt. But there's a problem with aftermarket antennas for the Goggles 2 that I hope that today's product is going to solve. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. The problem with aftermarket antennas for the DJI Goggles 2 is a little difficult for me to demonstrate because I don't have any aftermarket antennas for the Goggles 2 anymore. Every single one that I've ever used has been a giant pain in the ass, and I've stopped using them. One of the problems is that you have to take them off when you put them away in like your backpack or something. And these connectors here, they're not made for an infinite number of mating cycles. Eventually they wear out and you get bad connectivity. Or when you're putting the antennas on, you kind of misalign it somehow and you screw it up and you damage it, and then what? The other problem is that all of the aftermarket antennas are really insecure, is the best word I can come up with. They're constantly like falling out. They're just friction fit in there, and there are too many cases where during normal use they just don't work. They fall out or they become misaligned or something. And that's why, to this day, I still use the stock antennas. But here's the product we're looking at today that's supposed to solve it. This is the G2 patch antenna from BDI, British Drone Industries. And it is, as the name suggests, a patch antenna. But what makes it so interesting is the way that it connects onto the Goggles 2. It slides on here, and yes, it just friction fits in just like all the others. Let's make sure we've got that aligned correctly before we push it the rest of the way down in. I do believe we have. It slides on, and then it can fold up and down when you are putting them away. So that's kind of cool. And when it's on there pretty securely. I can't quite tell exactly how they're like attaching on, but they are on there really securely. Well, I mean, time will tell. I've been holding off putting these on my goggles because I needed to do a side-by-side test. In order to, like, if they don't give better range, then you may as well just use the stock antennas. And you would think it would be a given that an aftermarket antenna like this would give better range. But, well, it's not. I'm going to let you watch this first flight just so you can see how it plays out. But I'm also going to show you a chart in a minute that actually lets you get a better sense of the results than trying to sort of watch these two flights, which are pretty closely synced up, but not perfectly synced up. It's a waypoint mission, so it's going at the same speed to the same location, but there's still a little bit of variance. But I want you to see it happen at least once, and I'll sort of talk about how it's set up. So this flight has left-hand circular polarized antennas on the drone, and you can see in the upper left, there's the BDI antenna on the goggles, and in the lower right, there's the stock antenna on the goggles, and you can see the bit rate, which is really the thing that we're most concerned about. And there's a little bit of variance. Again, we're going to have a better sense of actually how that plays out when we look at the chart. Let's just go ahead and speed this up and skip ahead, because basically we're just going to fly in a straight line toward the next waypoint until we lose video. And we're just about to see at 1.24 kilometers the stock antenna drop out. And I used a threshold of 1 to 2 megabits per second, image transmission weak, red bar at the bottom. We could push through this, especially if this was an autonomous flight, but that's just where I decided to call it. And the BDI antenna goes a little bit further, but not that much further, 1.33, 1.34, and we get image transmission signal weak, red bar, and we turn around and we come back to home. So the BDI antennas did a little bit better than the stock goggle antennas, but that's not where this testing ends, because the antennas on my drone are not the antennas that many people running an O3 Air unit are going to use. And it's not just a subtle difference, it's actually a very significant difference. These antennas that come on the iFlight Chimera are left-hand circular polarized, and that matches the polarization of the BDI antennas. But that does not match the default polarization of the antennas that come on the DJI digital system. The O3 Air unit has a linear polarized antenna in it, and the DJI G2 antennas, the default ones, are linear polarized. And keep in mind, that doesn't just refer to the external antennas, which we've replaced with the BDI antennas. There are two internal antennas inside these goggles, and they are linear polarized as well. So we really have to test this with the stock O3 antenna, both for anybody who's running the stock O3 antenna to see if the results hold true, but also to see if the BDI antennas will improve things when they're used with a mismatched polarization antenna. I asked BDI this very question. I said, the DJI antennas are all linear polarized. Why are yours circular polarized? Because when you have a circular polarized antenna matching with a linear polarized antenna, you actually get a reduction in performance compared to when the polarization is matched. And they said, it's still better than stock. Well, let's find out. Before we continue with the video, I'd like to remind you that the single best way for you to help make sure that I am able to continue making content like this, which hopefully you value, is to join my Patreon. Patreon is a website where you subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month. That's the minimum amount, just $2 a month. Someone's vacuuming. But join my Patreon, get access to my Discord server, and just feel good about supporting the work that I do here. If you watch my content regularly, then hopefully eventually you'll come to a point where you go, this guy's earned my support. If today is that day, join my Patreon at any level, at any dollar value that you pick. $2, pick $5, pick $10, pick whatever amount you think is fair for the amount of value you get out of my content. There's a link down below where you can click through. And if today's not the day, if you're like, I just want to watch the video, you've probably already skipped ahead. But yeah, keep watching the content. I'll keep making the content, and I hope that day comes. So in this layout, we've got the left-hand circular polarized tests on the left. That's the ones that you just watched. And the linear polarized antenna, that's the stock O3 antenna on the right. And then at the top, we've got the stock antennas on the goggles. And on the bottom, we've got the BDI antennas on the goggles. So the new information is on the right. The test you already saw is on the left. And I don't want to make you sit here for 2 minutes and watch the whole thing again. I'm going to show you the chart that really makes it clear who won. But I will let you go ahead and watch to the end so you can see just the very sort of highlight reel of who dropped out first and who went further. One thing to keep in mind, on my O3 stock quad, it has a EP2 receiver with a ceramic antenna. So the range is significantly shorter than on my other drone, which has an external antenna. So it actually fail safes toward the end of the test and then just keeps flying its waypoint mission until it finally times out and returns to home. So it didn't just cut at 1 megabit per second. So we actually kind of get to see what happens if you push through the loss of link. You can see on the lower right, it's already saying RC link lost. And it's kind of interesting to see how the O3 responds. It gets down to that 1 megabit per second where I would have turned around, and then it kind of comes back and bounces up again. But again, it's not about how far. Maybe that's why I only got 1.2 kilometers. Maybe if I had continued to push, I would have pushed through and gotten further. Okay, so the left-hand polarized with the stock antenna has timed out. That was the first one to go. At about 1.33 kilometers, we will see the left-hand polarized with the BDI antenna time out. We can see in the upper right that the stock antenna with linear on drone is already at 0 megabits per second and is glitching. So it has officially sort of failed the test, although it is continuing to fly because I'm in failsafe. And the linear on the drone with the BDI antenna is the one that went the furthest. Linear antenna on the drone with the BDI antenna went the furthest. What the hell? Explain that result to me. Let's talk about it. Let's look at some graphs. The first one we're going to look at is the left-hand polarized circular antennas on the drone with both the BDI and the stock linear antenna. And the question here is, does the BDI produce an improvement when it is properly matched to the antennas on the drone? And we can see that, yes, it definitively does. The light green is the BDI, the dark green is the stock antenna on the goggles, and it's just pretty clear that the BDI is better pretty much throughout the entire range of the signal. Next, let's look at the results for the stock O3 antenna on the drone, which is linear. And the question here is, does the circular polarized BDI antenna give an improvement even when used with a linear polarized antenna on the drone? Does that cross or mismatched polarization result in a net positive, net negative, or no result? And we can see that the result is a little bit messier. Like if you look over here in this part, it's a little unclear, But in general, I think still we can say that the BDI antenna is producing a better result, even when used with the stock antenna on the drone, although it's not as clear as the difference when it's used with a circular polarized antenna on the drone. But the big question that we really want to answer is, of all of these situations, which is the best? And here we can see all 4 of the tests overlaid on each other. And I apologize that it's a little bit messy, but we've got the labels here at the bottom if you want to try to pause it and make sense of it. And what's really interesting to me about this is that for almost all of the tests, these light green dots are higher and further to the right. That means you were at a higher bit rate further out, so you're doing better. These light green dots, which is the left-hand polarized antenna plus the BDI antenna, that is the correctly matched polarization with the higher gain antenna, is doing the best. That is the result you would expect. But down here at the very end, somehow, for some reason, the linear antenna, the stock O3 antenna, pulls ahead. And it pulls ahead when combined with the circular polarized antenna on the goggles. This is a completely nonsensical result, and yet nevertheless, it is the result. Very clearly right here, these pink dots pop up and it pulls ahead and does better. And you can see from the video that it's not just a sort of a numerical result. The video stays usable longer. I can't make any sense of this. But what I can determine is that the BDI antennas are definitively improving the range. It is not a placebo, and well, based on just one test, right? But well, several tests, but just one guy doing the testing. It's not a placebo. It is a small but definitely noticeable advantage compared to the stock antennas. And that advantage is present no matter what antenna you have on your drone, whether the polarization is correctly matched or whether it's mismatched, although it does seem like the best performance almost all the time occurs when you have correctly matched antennas on the drone, that is, circular polarized on the drone, BDI circular polarized antennas on the goggles. Do keep in mind that the G2 goggles have 4 antennas. There's 2 external and 2 internal, and those 2 internal antennas are linear polarized. So maybe that's a source of this weird result. I don't know, but even when you've got the BDI antennas on there that are circular polarized, you've still got some linear polarized antennas working for you. And that may be one reason why we don't see as much difference whether the antennas are mismatched or whether the antennas are properly matched. But no matter what antennas you got on your drone, if you want to spend the money on the BDI antennas, then you will be getting a small performance upgrade. And especially if you're doing like actual long range stuff, I think that you're going to see, like, because what I'm doing is not actual long-range stuff. We have some obstructions, and that sort of knocks the results down. We saw only maybe 100, 150 meter improvement in range, but that's like 10%, 15% of the total range. And so if you were going 10 kilometers, getting an extra kilometer or a kilometer and a half, that would be much more notable than getting like an extra 100 meters out of something that I'm doing here. If you decide you do want to pick up the antennas, there's a link in the video description below. I'm going to be running these on my G2 as standard. I love the fact that they give a little boost in range, and I love the fact that they fold down so neatly and are so compact, and they're so secure on the goggles. They're not constantly falling off, and it really solves a lot of the problems that I've had with other higher gain antennas that have been used on my G2s. You could ask, if I were to buy a different antenna, would I get even better range? And to tell you the truth, I don't care. I've used higher gain antennas on my G2s, and the hassle of having them fall off and get loose and maybe even damage the MCX connector on the goggles potentially. That hasn't happened to me, but I always worry about it. The hassle of having to take them off when I put those MCX connectors in the goggles, they don't have an infinite number of mating cycles. Every time I take those antennas off and put the goggles in my backpack, that's one mating cycle, and eventually they're going to wear out and I'm going to get shitty range. This is a small upgrade in performance that I can just leave on there forever, and it seems like a no-brainer, again, if the money's worth it to you. If it is, there are links in the video description below where you can pick the goggles up, and I really appreciate you taking the time to use those links because they're affiliate links. What it means is you click that link, you go buy anything from the store, and then I get a little commission, and it's a great way for you to support the channel. It doesn't cost you any money. It's just a way of saying Bardwell sent me, and I get basically a kickback. So please, please use those links for all of your shopping. I know you spend a lot of money on this hobby. I won't tell your wife. Just go click those links, bookmark them for all I care. It would sure mean a lot. You know what test I got to do next is to repeat this with the O4 air unit. And I'm not prepared to do that right now because the only quad I've got with an 04 doesn't have iNav on it, but maybe I'll do that. In the meantime, let me let you see how much better the range of the 04 is compared to the 03. It's kind of stupid how much better the 04 is. So like, in theory, you'd do even better with these antennas, except, oops, you can't put these antennas on the G3. I hope BDI comes out with a version of the G3 that you can, like, I don't know how you would do it, but I hope they do, because that would be freaking baller. In the meantime, I'm going to be running these on my G2s, and I'll put a card on screen where you can check out my 04 testing if you want to do that. I'll see you there.